On the 17th of November 1996 at Survivor Series, we saw the first epic encounter between Stone Cold Steve Austin and Bret The Hitman Hart. A critically acclaimed match in which Bret Hart was victorious. However, the finish was rather inconclusive, so this was by no means the end of the rivalry, but rather the beginning. This fact became most evident 2 weeks later on Raw, when Austin interfered in a match between Bret and his brother Owen, and when Austin interfered again in Bret's match with Psycho Sid for the WWF Championship at In Your House It's Time. And to make matters even worse for Bret, longtime rival Shawn Michaels also interfered in the match, which ultimately cost the Hitman his chance to become champion. The next night on Raw, Bret promised a change in his attitude during an interview with Jim Ross, wherein he also lashed out at Austin and Michaels for their constant intrusions in his affairs. Bret additionally criticised the chaotic state of the WWF, but still announced himself as a participant in the upcoming Royal Rumble. In the Royal Rumble match itself, Bret Hart eliminated Steve Austin, however the referees did not see it, so Austin re-entered the ring, eliminated The Undertaker and Vader, and then eliminated Bret Hart to claim the controversial victory. Bret had been screwed again, and subsequently raged at the referees and perhaps more notably at Vince McMahon, who was on commentary duty. The following night on Raw, Bret immediately stormed out to the ring and continued to vent his frustrations to Vince by claiming that he had been screwed by the boy toy Shawn Michaels, screwed by Stone Cold Steve Austin, screwed by the World Wrestling Federation, and screwed by Vince himself. He then proceeded to quit the company and walked out. Steve Austin then came out to the ring and condemned Bret Hart for whining and complaining before uttering the iconic line, "Ever since you came back, you ain't done nothing but cry." Later that night, Gorilla Monsoon addressed the current controversy by announcing the main event for the next In Your House pay-per-view, a no disqualification 4-way elimination match to determine the next to number one contender for the WWF title between Vader, The Undertaker, Bret Hart if he accepted Monsoon's proposal, and Steve Austin. Of course, Austin came out to protest against this decision, whilst Bret returned through the crowd to accept the match. On the February 13th edition of Raw, Shawn Michaels renounced his recently won WWF title before the Heartbreak Kid infamously cut the Lost My Smile promo. And so the main event for In Your House Final 4 would now be contested for the WWF Championship. After a hard-fought contest, the Hitman was victorious and finally won his coveted WWF title. However, on the next night of Raw, amidst Bret Hart's mandatory championship match against Psycho Sid, Steve Austin interfered yet again. He nailed Bret in the head with a chair, Sid hit the powerbomb and covered for the victory and the title just one night after Bret had won it. A second match between Stone Cold Steve Austin and Bret Hart was made official not long after, a no-holds-barred submission match at WrestleMania 13 with mixed martial artist Ken Shamrock as the guest referee. It's easy to assume that Austin might not have been in favour of the stipulation, considering Bret's superior technical ability, but in the weeks leading up to WrestleMania, Austin repeatedly claimed that he would not submit and that he would not quit. Meanwhile, Bret's relentless complaining helped persuade Gorilla Monsoon to make a match for the go-home episode of Raw before WrestleMania, Psycho Sid vs Bret Hart for the WWF Championship inside of a steel cage. Funnily enough, Austin and The Undertaker both interfered in the match, but not in the way you might expect. Austin tried to prevent Sid from winning, whilst Taker tried to prevent Bret from winning. However, this did actually make a lot of sense, because Austin and Taker wanted their respective matches at WrestleMania to be for the WWF title. Ultimately, The Undertaker was successful, as he beat down Austin, slammed the cage door into the Hitman, knocking him back into the ring, which left Sid unopposed to climb up and over the cage to win the match. Thus, Austin and Bret would be contested without the WWF Championship on the line. Bret Hart's anger had reached its boiling point, as he pushed Vince McMahon down onto his ass before launching into another diatribe based on all of the injustice that had been done against him. This was the first time that Vince was somewhat involved in an on-screen storyline and is actually cited by some as the birth of the Mr. McMahon character. Despite his outburst, Bret was still heading into WrestleMania as the babyface, whilst Austin was still the heel, though the recent reactions that both competitors had been receiving from crowds, as well as the gift of hindsight, hinted that a potential double turn of the century was certainly not out of the question. What's up, wrestling fans? My name is Aaron and this is Wrestling by Waldridge, and welcome to Season 1, Chapter 9 of Under Analysis, where in today's video I will be looking at the iconic first match between Bret The Hitman Hart and Stone Cold Steve Austin in a no-holds-barred submission match from WrestleMania 13. If you're new here, welcome to the channel, and if you're returning, it's bloody great to see you again. If you enjoy this video, please subscribe to the channel. We're still on that road to 500 subscribers. Please give the video a like, give it a share across social media, and hit the notification bell to be notified when I release new videos on the channel, as well as Chapter 10 of Under Analysis, which, as always, I will be hinting towards at the end of the video, so you've got to stick around. Austin makes his glass-shattering entrance first, and then the Hitman follows him. Ken Shamrock calls for the bell. Austin immediately charges at Bret and takes him down onto the mat. The match kicks off with an all-out brawl inside the ring and outside the ring, before Bret sends Austin face first into the turnbuckle as Jim Ross claims all hell is breaking loose. Bret looks to suplex Austin over the guardrail, but Austin counters it by planting Bret onto the guardrail, right on his nether regions. Poor lad. Austin clotheslines Bret and then takes him into the crowd whilst continuing his assault. The audience were going bonkers, because you seldom saw the wrestlers fight their way through the crowd in this time period. I also thought Vince did a great job when he said how the match was falling right into Austin's game plan. Austin knows that he can't compete with Bret on a technical level, but he's certainly able to brawl with the best of them. Austin eventually attempts to use a pile driver, but Bret counters with a back body drop, and with that, Bret is able to take the match back to the ringside area. I absolutely love this opening segment, because I think it best highlights the hatred between Austin and Bret. A brawl to kick things off definitely made a lot more sense, as opposed to a lock-up leading into a technical battle would have done. Bret looks to use an Irish whip, but Austin counters it, sending Bret hard into the steel steps. A great bump by Bret. And then after a double axe handle from the ring apron, Austin picks up the top steel step, but before he's able to act, Bret kicks him in the midsection. The two rivals continue to trade momentum as the action leads back into the ring, and then Bret nails Austin with a swinging neckbreaker. Bret hits Austin with a diving elbow to the back of the head, and then goes straight to work on Austin's left leg. Fantastic psychology from Bret, as Austin has been dealing with a hamstring injury ever since the most recent In Your House pay-per-view. Bret focuses all of his attacks on that left leg, which Austin sells very well. Austin remains as defiant as ever though, as he flips the bird at Ken Shamrock when he asks him if he wants to give up. It's also definitely worth mentioning Bret's aggressive facial expressions and the startling change in his attitude whilst he has been on the offensive, a sign of things to come perhaps. Bret performs a hip attack to Austin's leg, but Austin avoids it and then out of nowhere hits Bret with a stunner, but unfortunately he's unable to capitalise. Austin and Bret slowly rise to their feet, however Austin is unable to put any weight on the left leg, which allows Bret to recover and kick his right leg out from underneath him. Bret then performs an excellent manoeuvre as he drags Austin over to the corner and then applies a ring post assisted figure 4 leg lock. It looked tremendous. The crowd is going wild. The submission looks incredibly painful, but Austin will still not give up. JR, King and Vince all clamour over their admiration for Austin's sheer determination and his willpower to not quit. Eventually, Bret relents and breaks the hold. However, the Hitman shows just how frustrated he is as he rolls to the outside of the ring to grab the ring bell and a steel chair. A contradictory decision by the babyface, to say the least. But this decision is only reaffirmed when Bret traps Austin's leg inside the steel chair with the intention of Pillmanizing it. A fantastic piece of storytelling, as this is exactly how Austin injured Brian Pillman, Bret Hart's friend, before their Survivor Series matchup. Bret climbs to the top turnbuckle, but he takes far too long, which gives Austin enough time to escape and then smash Bret over the back with the steel chair. Austin wallops Bret once again, he hits a modified power slam, Irish whips Bret hard into the turnbuckle, and then nails him with a vertical suplex, all of which inflicted damage upon Bret's back. Austin additionally proceeds to target Bret's neck with a diving double axe handle, a Russian leg sweep, and then a modified Koji clutch. But Bret does not give up, so Austin transitions into a Boston Crab. An excellent choice of move, and excellent psychology used by Austin this time, as it's a very suitable follow-up to Austin's work to Bret's back. Austin has the submission cinched in tight, but Bret slowly makes his way to the bottom rope. He grabs it and Shamrock almost has to interject for Austin to break the hold. Austin then cheekily begins to apply the sharpshooter, but Bret thumbs Austin in the eye. Another questionable move. Bret and Austin slowly rise to their feet again, now showing fatigue on top of their injuries. Bret lays in some hard rights, but Austin responds by throwing Bret over the top rope. Austin attempts to Irish whip Bret, but it's countered, sending Austin into the timekeeper's area and head first into the guardrail. Bret proceeds to hammer away at his opponent as it becomes apparent that Austin has been busted open, which comes as another big shock to the audience and the commentary, as blood was also a very rare sight in the WWF up until this point. Nevertheless, Bret resumes his beatdown on Austin around ringside in his newfound aggressive manner before he rolls Austin back into the ring. And then in yet another controversial move, Bret begins to pummel at Austin's open wound, as Jim Ross uses the word sadistic to describe his actions. Bret performs a backbreaker and then hits a diving elbow drop again to Austin's open wound. Bret picks up the steel chair and then repeatedly slams it down on Austin's leg. Austin is writhing in pain and Bret is just out of control as King calls him a coward. Bret attempts a sharpshooter, but Austin fights his way out of it by raking at Bret's eyes. Bret lands with more hard right shots, but then Austin hits Bret with a low blow. The big difference between Austin and Bret both using these cheap maneuvers is that Austin has never deviated from who he is regardless of how the crowd feels about him, whereas Bret is supposed to be this righteous, morally correct character who the fans are supposed to look up to. Yet in this match, Bret's actions have not been any more virtuous as Austin's have. Austin gingerly gets back to his feet and then sends Bret into the turnbuckle sternum first. Austin is all kinds of fired up. A big portion of the crowd and commentary now seem to be right behind Austin as he begins to stomp a mud hole into Bret. Austin then lifts Bret onto the top turnbuckle and performs a middle rope superplex. Austin then rolls to the outside and grabs a power cable as Bret crawls to the ring apron. But unfortunately for him, it's right where Austin wants him, as he begins to choke Bret with the power cable. A very unorthodox but clever move by Austin in order to try and get Bret to submit. However, Bret grabs the ring bell that was still on the apron and smashes Austin over the head with it. He stalks over to Austin, who is trying desperately to recover, trips him up, and then finally applies the sharpshooter. The crowd is going absolutely wild as Austin is screaming in agony. He's too far away to reach the bottom rope. Shamrock keeps asking Austin if he wants to give up, but Austin just screams no at him. Austin begins to fade with blood pouring from his head, but no, he's not finished yet. Austin keeps resisting as he lifts himself onto his hands. King screams that Austin is doing the impossible as he finally breaks out of the sharpshooter, but it's only temporary as Bret reapplies the submission. Austin eventually passes out and Shamrock calls for the bell. Bret Hart claims the hard-fought victory, but Austin spoke the truth, he never gave up. After the match had finished, a clearly unsatisfied Bret continued to attack Austin's legs until Shamrock forcibly removed him. Bret then exited the ring to a complete chorus of boos. Austin finally recovered to the crowd chanting his name, and so the double turn was complete. The hero became a villain, and the anti-hero would only become a much bigger star. If this is not the best match of all time, then in my opinion it's certainly the best in-ring story of all time. The iconic double turn, never been done before and has never been done as well since. Despite his heelish actions, Austin still endeared himself to the crowd through his determination and toughness, and if there was ever a time where blood could be used to enhance the story of a match, it was in this match. It only made Austin's struggle look that more authentic. On the other hand, Bret's growing frustrations boiled over to the point where he would try to claim the victory by any means necessary, no matter how underhanded his decisions were. The audience noticed this, and slowly but surely they turned on him. But I don't think that this alone turned the crowd against him. Bret's body language, his facial expressions, and his trash talking were clear as day. At times it looked as if Bret only cared about putting Austin on the shelf for good via his ferocious attacks to Austin's leg. And speaking of which, that was another story incorporated into this match. Even Austin's work to the back was a small yet simple story that wasn't necessarily needed, but it definitely added more meat to the match. I mentioned a couple of times in the match breakdown how great the psychology was, the all-out brawl to begin with. I've already touched upon how clever it was for Bret to attack Austin's leg, and I also thought Bret's move choices were very clever too. One of the best examples of this was when Austin tried to apply the sharpshooter. However, Bret has since claimed that Austin wasn't doing it correctly, so he thought on his feet and raked at Austin's eyes. An excellent snap decision which still supported his character's motive in the story. Austin's blade job was timed to absolute perfection. It came after Bret's technical onslaught, which initially built the foundations for the crowd's growing sympathy for Austin, and when Austin got busted open, it just took that to a whole nother level. The selling was absolutely brilliant by both performers, especially Austin's selling of his injured leg. The submission maneuvers were sold very well too, and the general selling of fatigue and exhaustion was terrific. Whilst this wasn't the most technically pure wrestling match, it was still very good in the work rate department. The work rate in Austin and Bret's previous match was probably its strongest facet, but I definitely enjoyed how it took more of a back seat to the storytelling in this match. Still, there was some great technical wrestling to be had from both wrestlers here. I loved Bret's figure 4 leg lock off the ring post, but the contest also featured a lot of hard-hitting brawling, so the match never felt one-dimensional. And it was just great to see both competitors use so many maneuvers which aligned with their strategies, which definitely ties into the psychology of the match nicely. As for the drama and the excitement in this match, amazing. There weren't any notable high spots to get the crowd on their feet, but the fans were treated to scenes which did not happen very often. The wrestlers brawling into the audience and the graphic use of blood were both scenes which garnered huge reactions from the crowd. It was super interesting to see how the crowd responded to Austin and Bret as the match progressed. You could tell just how much people were starting to get behind Austin, especially during his comeback. The crowd was super hot for him, and the displeasure towards Bret's questionable actions and his bad attitude got louder and louder. The submissions used in this match emitted great drama, but the final submission was particularly dramatic. That reaction to Austin eventually breaking out of the sharpshooter was deafening. The finish was just brilliant. Easily one of the most iconic closing sequences of all time. Not only did it round off the story surrounding Austin's leg nicely, it also proved to the fans that Austin and his undeniable toughness was the real deal. The timing of the submission was perfect. Austin suckered everyone into thinking that he was finished, only to find that burning desire within him to fight back yet again to temporarily break out of the sharpshooter, which was an incredibly protective finisher at the time, all whilst covered in blood. And the fact that he passed out instead of giving up was just the icing on the cake. Austin kept his promise. The match was moderately paced, it wasn't too fast or too slow, but there isn't 1 second in this match that I found boring. The match lasted 22 minutes and 5 seconds, which is the perfect amount of time for Austin and Bret to effectively tell their story. There was no filler whatsoever. Dave Meltzer rated this match at 5 stars. I mean, how can you not? I could probably talk about this match for a hell of a lot longer, to be honest. It's wrestling perfection in my opinion. 5 stars without a doubt. But be sure to let me know what rating you would give this match in the comment section down below. Also let me know if you enjoyed this video. Please remember to hit that subscribe button. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at WrestlingByW. Give the video a share, stunner that like button, and give the notification bell a sharp shooter to be notified when I release new videos on the channel. I hope you will have great days guys, and I shall see you all for the next one. Bye bye.